Former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has taken to Twitter to say he fled Kabul to save the capital from bloodshed. He says his security personnel advised the secret departure, which opened the gates of the city to a Taliban takeover. Ghani also denies widespread allegations of corruption, as well as charges that he left the country with millions of dollars. He says there should be an independent investigation. Now, Ghani's sudden departure has been widely criticized, both in Afghanistan and abroad. Washington has blamed Ghani's flight and the government's collapse for a Taliban takeover ahead of a negotiated deal.
And AP reporter Aya BATRAWY has been monitoring events from Dubai, and she joins us now. Aya, good to see you again. Now, first, it appears this Qatari flight will be leaving Kabul at some point today with 200 Americans and other foreigners. What more can you tell us?
Right. The Qataris had they spoke to reporters actually from the tarmac of Kabul airport today. And what they essentially said was that they have a Qatar Airways flight that will be ready and prepared to take off today with 100 to 150 or more American citizens. And, this just goes again to show sort of the role that Qatar has played in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal out of Afghanistan because of its relationship with the Taliban over the past many years.
That announcement of the banning of women's sports in Afghanistan, how significant is this, and how is it going to impact the way that the world sees Afghanistan?
I mean, for what we've seen from our reporting is, a cabinet that is all male, and a cabinet that is stacked with a government, really, that is stacked with Taliban figures. And so if anyone is surprised that the government that is ruled by the Taliban is not the kind of government that existed previously under Ashraf Ghani and the U.S.-backed leadership, I don't think many people would have expected a U.S. female cabinet minister so soon, or women to have a prominent, visible role in society under the Taliban. And I think these concerns and fears about how Taliban would rule the country are what led so many people in Afghanistan to leave the country. More than 100,000 people evacuated. But it's also still, I would say, early to see exactly how the Taliban will rule, because they do need, international recognition. They are looking to build ties with international global heavyweights like China, like Russia, and of course with Gulf Arab countries and Pakistan and others.
Okay, Aya, while you're speaking, we can see images of what appear to be protests happening there in Afghanistan, and these protests seem to be continuing within the country. How widespread are they?
It's difficult to tell exactly how many people are opposed to the Taliban, given, just the difficulty of reaching all the provinces and really knowing what's happening, because they're all under Taliban rule. And so many journalists have fled the country. But we have seen from the very, very beginning of the Taliban takeover, even before they took over Kabul, a real repression of dissent in some cases. And we have certainly heard of journalists being targeted in some ways, covering these protests. And there's a real concern, I think, for media freedoms in Afghanistan and how the media will be able to continue to operate, particularly local Afghan media.
Yeah, speaking of the media, I'm wondering how the foreign governments are adjusting to this new Taliban government. Like, we're hearing the U.S. administration's concerned about, we spoke about earlier, those terrorist connections of the senior positions, the senior officials in the Taliban government, how they have major terrorist connections. How is the international community taking this?
Again, I think it depends which country you ask. Japan and the United States, for example, are two countries which relocated their diplomatic staff from Kabul to Doha, Qatar, in order to continue diplomacy with Afghanistan or on Afghanistan. And so there will be, I think, continued conduits like Qatar or Pakistan in order to deal with this new Afghan government. But also, of course, humanitarian aid and aid organizations are also continuing their work on the ground. Don't forget, this is one of the world's poorest countries. And many people are at risk of famine and hunger. And so, work has to continue.
Okay, apparently former President Ashraf Ghani has defended his escape on Twitter from Afghanistan when his forces fell to the Taliban. How has this defense been received, generally speaking?
I mean, he's here in the United Arab Emirates, where I'm speaking to you from. He came here, and when he fled the country, the government essentially collapsed, and that's when the Taliban, we saw them just really marching into Kabul without a shot fired. His reputation now, his legacy is certainly very tarnished. People within his own government who stayed behind in Kabul essentially called what he did treasonous, and they said he really stabbed the country in the back. And his statement released in English on Facebook, I think really shows the audience he's targeting in that.
Yeah, it seems like his citizens, or the ones he left behind, are feeling quite betrayed and left behind. Would you say that that's the sentiment for all of the people in Kabul, or does he have some supporters who actually think that maybe his leaving early prevented what could have been more bloodshed?
In all of our collective reporting, I haven't heard of a single person in Afghanistan or outside of Afghanistan who has said that him leaving was the responsible thing to do, and that him fleeing Kabul and the country to the United Arab Emirates was in some way saving the country. Don't forget, tens of thousands of Afghan forces died fighting the Taliban over the last 2 decades. And many were willing to continue fighting.
Okay, let's briefly speak on what options are left to women in Afghanistan who may feel cornered by the way things are unfolding.
The rights of women is going to continue to be a really important question. And it's going to continue to be, I think, a barometer for really what type of government the Taliban is going to but how the type of rule it will have. As will media freedoms. Look to the media freedoms, look to the press freedoms, the way that the media is allowed to operate and cover the government, and the way that women are allowed to work, go to school, attend university, sit in meetings with their male counterparts, and be visible in society as real barometers for how this Afghanistan is going to look. But the Taliban have not minced their words. They have said this is going to be a government that follows Sharia law, and their interpretation of Islamic law is one that is seen as quite narrow and quite restrictive for women.
Yeah, we will continue to watch the situation. Thank you for that, Aya BATRAWY, reporting live from Dubai.